Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Defenders and Lab Coats. We have a very, very exciting episode that I'm sure a lot of you can relate to, and I personally is very excited to have the special guest on. So please welcome Jessica to the lab today. Hi, Jessica.
Hello. Royals on the wild card. It's game 2, so I'm very excited.
For those who do not know, there's currently a baseball game going on here in Kansas City tonight, so we are bringing our spirit.
Yes, very much.
All right, so Jessica, to kind of kick us off, would you mind introducing who you are and your journey into cybersecurity?
Absolutely. So, yes, I am Jessica Cassidy. I have been in tech recruiting for about 17 years and really found a pretty easy transition into cybersecurity recruitment because of the transition from the tech space to then going over to Fish Tech Group in January of 2019. And so I was a part of that amazing group until about March of 2023. And through those almost 5 years, I was able to recruit from your entry-level security analyst, detection engineering, threat hunting, telemetry. You've got then the professional services side where you've got identity, GRC, enterprise architecture, and then really learning about the MSSP technologies that we utilized, the specific types of security engineers that we needed. So through the patience of many of the security technologists that were at Fish Tech and at Cyderus, that is really how I was able to be successful in cybersecurity recruitment during that time.
Yes, and that's actually how you and I met, was
Yes.
You had recruited me.
Yes. As Fish Techers, we are a tight-knit group.
Absolutely. I feel like everyone knew someone through a Gary Fish company at some point in their career, at least in Kansas City. And it's just like, oh yeah, we were there for XYZ, and that's how we ended up doing this. So I always think it's cool, and especially fast forward, right? That was 2021 and 2024, and we just randomly saw each other at a conference.
Yes, at Secure World in Chicago.
Of all places, not even Kansas City.
I know. Well, and what's interesting too is, prior to being at Fish Tech, I was with a company called OP, or Objective Paradigm, and we've recently rebranded to Objective Partners. So when I made that transition from OP, where I was responsible for all of this, various technical recruiting, and had lived in Chicago, then when I left Cyderus and then starting OPCyberTalent, where OP is still obviously headquartered, it was so cool to see you. When I saw you on the docket for the Secure World, I was like, oh my gosh, Rihanna's here. She's one of the speakers. This is going to be so cool. So yeah, my team was really, they were excited to meet you as well. So it was great.
It was a great team. I remember meeting them, and I was just like, oh, they're so passionate. And that's why you go to these events, That's
right.
Now, Jessica, question for you. As you kind of went through recruiting and everything, what are some challenges you might have faced, or maybe things that people ask for you for advice, and they're like, I might just be scared to apply for a job,
Sure.
How would you guide that conversation, or how would you mentor those people?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So this does happen a lot. What happens is you'll find somebody who is either in maybe a software engineering path or a systems administration path, or maybe even project management. And they're like, okay, I want to get into cybersecurity. So how do I navigate that? I think what the biggest challenge is identifying, okay, where's that gap from where you're at today to where you want to be. And so then trying to figure out how you're going to either upskill, what sources are you going to utilize, what or resources are you going to utilize, who are you going to reach out to in order for you to really bridge that gap with whatever knowledge that may be. So if, say, a systems admin is really wanting to go to cybersecurity, identity could be a great entryway,
right?
Because of how much identity access management relies on, certain Microsoft technologies, Active Directory, for example. If somebody's in software engineering, how do they bridge that gap? Again, it's like, okay, well, you could go into DevSecOps. You could go into the red team. You could go into incident response. So there's different paths you could take. So I'm always just trying to figure out, okay, where are they today? Where do they want to get to? And then that's really where the work needs to be done, is in the middle, and figuring out, who do I know? Who do they know? What resources do they have? Do they want to go to a 4-month, 5-month boot camp? All that good stuff. So, and I know we're going to get into a lot of that later, but.
Oh yeah. No, and that's great advice. I actually work with a guy, and he had started off as like music tech, and he was wanting to go into like playing the guitar and the piano at a professional symphonic level. And then he took like a random class in college, and now he works, IT and does system admin work, and is now trailing into the cybersecurity side. And it's just like, it's always so cool to hear about different people's journey and stuff, getting into the field. And that has to be such a huge plus, like on the recruitment side, you get to meet all of these awesome people.
Oh yeah. I have one candidate that's a former MLB player.
Oh my gosh.
So talk about a transition, going from professional sports into technology. But I have seen music. I have seen a music background, and it's got to be with something with, the orchestration of the music and putting everything together, and maybe even taking everything apart and understanding the baseline of what goes where, and just the foundation. And I think that does definitely relate to, music can relate to tech.
It's always so inspiring too. It just so is. It makes you feel like so energized leaving everything. But now I know you probably have looked at a lot of resumes in your career.
Yes.
What is a good foundational start? I know people who have created, I don't know if you remember your first resume. Mine was terrible. Absolutely terrible. Definitely. But what is some advice that you might give to people? Because I know the first thing that they might do is go to Google or now a Gen AI tool, and they're like, hey, write my resume for me, and that all the times, does that work? But what's a good starting point, or how do you recommend building that resume for them?
Yeah, so there's kind of, let's say, 4 or 5 key components that I always advise folks on. So first and foremost, you're going to have the baseline. You're going to have your LinkedIn. Well, obviously your name bolded at the top, LinkedIn, email, your preferred phone number. Some folks like to put a picture, some don't. It's up to you. But as far as the kind of meat and potatoes of a resume, the resume length, I always recommend keep it 3 pages or less. Many people will say 1 to 2 pages, but for some of these security professionals, and really any type of professional that's been in their career, let's say over 10 years, they're going to have a lot of information that they're going to want to share. Right. But keeping it to a max of 3 pages, and then really condensing and being concise in the information that's on your resume will help you then achieve that max 3 page. Now, if you're entry, let's say entry level to 2 years experience, a 1-pager should be just fine. But once you get to, 4, 5, 6, and then on, 3 pages max. For key sections, I always recommend at the top, your objective, your summary. It's sharing a little bit about your writing skills. It's sharing a very concise way of how you want to present yourself to that either recruiter or hiring manager. I also say, or I should say, also advise a technology overview. So only list the technologies that you can confidently support. If you've touched it once, don't list it. But if you can support it, you can rip and replace, you can migrate, then absolutely state that. And then when it comes to certifications and education, if you're entry level, I always recommend putting your education at the top. Whatever maybe certifications that you've already obtained, or the certifications that maybe are in progress. And then if you're more of a experienced professional, I don't know that I really have a preference if you put your education or your certifications at the top or the bottom, because, once you've got that more experience, your objective, your technical proficiencies will jump out more than maybe education and certifications, although it's all very important. From employment details, I would say you've got to summarize each role with 4 to 5 bullets. And they have to be realistic highlights of what you did. What did you contribute to? It's not a time to embellish. It's a time to concisely and accurately display what you contributed to that specific role.
Right.
From company dates, employment types, please be accurate, and also have your LinkedIn profile reflect the same dates. If it's just, month and a year, that's fine. You don't have to go to the day, but month and year, they need to match up. If it's a different type of employment type, many folks have a mix of contract, full-time, consulting. I think it's important to highlight, because then it's just going to be a little bit confusing. That way it's just there. And I think that also shows the integrity of the resume.
Right.
And I really want to stress this.
Yeah.
When it comes to employment gaps.
You read my mind, Jessica. I was about to ask you that one next.
When it comes to employment gaps. So many candidates, many recruiters, many hiring managers have either experienced and been affected by downsizing, risks, voluntary severance packages. We got to shut the doors, things that are completely out of their control, or maybe not even performance-based, or maybe it was performance-based and they really took a chance on you, but it just didn't click, or it didn't work for you, or whatever that may be. We need to really normalize those gaps, because it does happen. It's happening more and more and more, especially in the security community. Yeah. So I think as long as you're upfront about your employment gap, upfront to from the resume perspective, from the recruiter perspective. So when you're, first having that initial screen with the recruiter, be upfront. With the hiring manager, be upfront. But you want to have almost like a story to tell, because it is part of your employment history just as much as the technology that you gained. Right. So I think if you have a nice, just upfront, concise way, again, to say how that gap affected you, and then what were you doing in that gap? Right. Were you maybe taking some additional courses? Were you learning something new? Were you getting a certification? Something that shows that you were still kind of, maximizing your time during that gap. Yeah.
One of my friends, he wasn't affected by a tech layoff. It's common, right? Within the last couple of years, especially post-COVID, people would do mass hires to meet the demands of the technology. And then, where we are in the world today, layoffs are more common, sadly, than what like we like to admit. So during his time of the layoff, he got his severance package. It was 3 months. He was applying for jobs, and it's just kind of one of those, everyone was applying to the same companies because everyone got laid off, in the same area. And so he had actually created his own video game, because he goes, if I'm going to stay at home and play video games until I get a job, I'm just going to make my own.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And he highlighted on his resume. So it's one of those, like, it stings, but you took like such a vulnerable time in your life and you made lemonade out of it, essentially. So that's
absolutely
hit the nail on the head, Jessica. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And then also you may have different versions of your resume.
Yes.
Depending upon the role, because we all know, especially in security engineering or consulting, you could be a fit for like 3 different types of roles. So be sure to tailor, but genuinely, honestly tailor your resume for those various roles that you're trying to achieve for your next step.
Yes. Yeah. Quick question. We kind of talked about resumes a little bit, and this might be divvying off some of the topics. What's your opinion on cover letters? I often hear like the rumors, some people just don't even submit them. Some people go above and beyond. What was your recommendation on that from your side?
You know, I think if we're talking about a leadership position, I think a cover letter could be
Yeah.
useful, where it may show some KPIs.
Mm-hmm.
It may show kind of your mentality of what you would do for like from a 30, 60, 90-day plan.
Oh, that's smart. Yeah.
But outside of lead roles, leadership roles, C-level roles,
Yeah.
I don't know that it's needed. I've
Yeah.
never, let's put it this way, I've never heard a hiring manager or somebody from my recruitment team say, I'm not going to consider this candidate because they don't have a cover letter.
Yes.
And that goes for individual contributors and folks that have direct reports or in a leadership position.
Yes.
But I think it can help kind of shine the light on you if you are going for maybe a lead, senior, or managerial executive type role.
I didn't even think about the 30, 60, 90 in a cover letter. That's really smart. Yeah. That's some good insight.
I always recommend 30, 60, 90. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Now Jessica, I might not like know if you have experience in this area and everything. I know we kind of talk about resumes and cover letters a little bit. What's some advice for maybe people who are straight out of college, right? And they just feel like they're applying and not getting anywhere. What's your recommendation to like maybe get connected with someone that could help, or how can they just continue that leverage and not get burned out on applying?
Yeah. So I know that is super challenging because I feel like the market right now is pretty inundated with a lot of really qualified entry-level candidates, whether that be from the software engineering side, security side, whatever kind of technologist, let's just say. When you are putting together your resume, add your GPA, add what you were doing. So let's just kind of think about cybersecurity. Were you playing like hack the box, capture the flag?
Yep.
Do you have internships that you want to highlight? GPA is great. What clubs were you a part of?
Yeah.
Anything that shows that you were doing things outside of the classroom.
Yep.
That was taking away time from your studies, but somehow you managed to do all of these three things or several things, one to many things. So that would be my biggest advice on that side as far as resume preparation, and keep it to one page.
Yep.
From a application process, I feel like a lot of entry level will maybe just go like the big Fortune 500 route.
Yes.
And you got to think everybody's going that route. So you really want to have a diversification of definitely go for, the Fortune 500 route, but also maybe look at the startups. Look at some of those smaller organizations, and you can certainly do, you can pretty much Google anything. But maybe some of these fastest growing, best places to work.
Yeah.
Organizations, typically if they're a best place to work, then they have great training available.
Yeah.
And then LinkedIn can be really powerful because you're going to target, said companies.
Yeah.
And then try to reverse engineer who do you think is a part of those teams for the role that you're applying to.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a software engineering role, if it's a security engineering role, well, then you want to connect with that, maybe a team member, or try to do your best to figure out if you can, who the hiring manager may be, or the lead, whoever kind of that candidate champion may be.
Yeah.
And connect with them and talk to them and say, what did you do in order to get noticed and get your role? Or maybe you find somebody that is working for that said company and they've only been there a year. Contact them. What did you do?
Yep.
It's just showing that you're putting work in up front in order to get noticed, along with all the experience that you're going to bring.
Yeah, absolutely. I always like the saying that your net worth is your network, essentially. And a lot of people that work at companies that you're applying for, like outside even the recruitment, me personally, I get messages and they're like, hey, what's culture like? And like people are honest, they're going to tell you, especially if they've been there for a very long time, and they're going to be like, oh, I've avoided a couple of places when I was interviewing just because of word of mouth, but then you go on Forbes or you go on Glassdoor, and it tells a story, people want to talk, whether it's good or bad,
It does. And I always just say, Glassdoor is kind of a slippery slope. Nothing against Glassdoor, because Glassdoor is great. I mean, it provides a lot of insight. Yeah. But you got to think of the source of that insight. Yep. If somebody was, involuntary terminated, and they have some sort of, maybe ill feelings about how it went down, then they're going to leave, a nasty review. But if you do see something that's trending where, then just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. The Glassdoor is a great tool in order to do research on, kind of the environment. I think there's also a tool called Fishbowl. But again, the best places to work, that's a great source.
Yes, absolutely. And now, Jessica, a question for you. I feel like people know what they should be making, right? People do their research in the area. They benchmark where like their salary is and everything. Now, sometimes they might get an interview and an offer, and it's significantly low than they expect. And I feel like sometimes, especially in this field, we just want a job, right? But we know how much we should be paid. Should people feel confident to maybe counter or just ask questions, or how would you advise maybe a candidate to go that route?
Yep. So if you're at the point of an offer, there's obviously something about that role, about that team, that everything's really connecting. So during those conversations, there should have been upfront conversations about what are my expectations. Then there's going to be, once the offer hits, depending upon what the hiring manager and, maybe their compensation analysis compared to benchmarking other folks on the team are making, they want to make sure that everything is aligned and that they're not bringing in somebody necessarily that's going to really impact that compensation level for that team. Right. So how do you navigate that? What you need to do is, if you get an offer that's significantly lower, well, you need to ask why. Yeah. What are the other individuals with the same skill set? And the recruiter or the hiring manager should be able to talk that through with you. Yep. But then you also got to look at the opportunity itself, because money is not everything. Right. Is it remote? Is it hybrid? Is it team that you just know that you're going to, jive with? Yep. And can you think about, okay, well, let's say I really prove myself. I meet these, KPIs or whatever I am to be measured for my success. Is there an opportunity then to ask for an increase or be considered for an increase after a certain amount of time? So you can always ask for that. You can always negotiate, and you should always negotiate on your behalf, because you're the advocate for your own self. So, I think finding a way where it's saying, okay, well, why was I suggested offer, X offer? Here's where I want to be. Can we meet somewhere in the middle? And then that brings up all different types of stuff. Okay, so base salary may go up, 5 or 10K. Maybe it goes up 15K. It's probably not going to go up much from that, realistically. Is there a sign-on bonus? Is there another way that you can be compensated based upon performance? So you really kind of want to be thinking about everything and not just the base salary that's being offered. Because there's just so many different things that make up a total offer package.
Yeah, it's always intimidating. It's always like it's almost like a negotiation on both sides, right? And I feel like from the candidate level, it often, and you can disagree, right? But to me, sometimes it feels often lost that the candidate's also interviewing that company at the same time, right?
They are,
and
absolutely, interviewing the company.
Yeah. Especially like kind of going back to the interview process a little bit.
Yeah.
At the very end, especially with maybe on the leadership side, I always ask the candidate, hey, what questions do you have for me? Right.
Mhm.
Now being in the candidate role, what is your recommendations? What should people be asking the hiring manager? What should they know before even thinking about working there?
Yep, absolutely. So my interview tips are, I've got kind of the interview preparation tips, and then while you're in it, interviewing tips. So let's start with kind of interview preparation. You want to be doing your homework on the company. You want to understand, okay, this is the hiring manager. How long has he or she been there? What is the team like? What is the team dynamics, and how long has the team been there? But you also want to make sure that when you're applying to the role, what would you mentally do and how do you see yourself in that role? So again, it kind of goes back to that 30, 60, 90-day plan. Okay, so if you're going to apply from an analyst job to a security engineering job, what am I going to do on my end for the 30, 60, 90? And what are they going to do on their end for the 30, 60, 90? Because you're going to be having to do some things on your own to study and really kind of keep up, or, not keep up necessarily, but be able to kind of take everything in, and you're learning a lot. And then you've got to think about just being honest during the interview process. If somebody's asking you questions, if you don't know the answer, it's just to say, okay, I don't know the answer to that, but how does that question relate to this role? And then maybe it dives into another needed conversation where you can add value into those areas. But you want to be asking, what are the team's current challenges? What are the key technologies they're using in the environment? Do they have the plan to replace or upgrade? What projects are prioritized for the team currently? What do they think is going to be prioritized for the next 6 to 12 months? What has that individual's experience been at that organization? So maybe that's the hiring manager, maybe that's the recruiter, maybe it's during the panel, you've got the team interview. What are the KPIs for the role? How is success measured? What does a successful candidate look like in 6 to 12 months from the hiring manager's point of view? What does a long-term career look like? Being realistic when it comes to, understanding the role and being able to, concisely and effectively communicate what your experience has been and how it's going to relate to the success of that team go forward.
Right. I remember back in my day, right, when I was interviewing and stuff, and I even asked you this question when you were recruiting me, and I was like, what's continuous education like? Like, what platforms do you guys have? And there was one company, full remote and everything, and it hit all the bells and whistles for me. And the response to the continuous education, because that was big, right? Technology doesn't stay still. The answer was, oh, we don't invest in that. And I was like, well, what about like university reimbursement? No, we don't do any of that. We don't do anything with education whatsoever. And I was like, no, that is a deal breaker for me. It's almost like a bad date,
Yeah. Well, and you got to think about that because security is ever changing. I mean, it's consistently changing, I feel like, day to day. Oh, yeah. So companies that they may invest in all of these bells and whistles from a security product perspective, but those products could not be worth anything or not necessarily worth anything, but couldn't be necessarily relevant to that role because now maybe there's something else. There's more automation. There's more AI. I mean, whatever it might look like. Or they're just going a completely different route and have to rip and replace. So how are you going to continuously learn if you're not offered, whether it may be sitting with vendors and talking about tools, looking at different boot camps or cybersecurity programs or networking events, anything like that can, help them. And by the networking events, I mean like the secure worlds or, whatever type of
conference,
DEF CON, Black Hat, all that kind of good stuff that you may want to go to. Are they going to support you in attending it? But now if somebody's somewhat entry level, maybe they don't go and they send their more senior technologists to that. That's okay.
Yeah.
But I think that the teams have to be prepared to invest in those individuals from continuous learning and conferences and
everything else.
That extra education. Yeah.
Now, Jessica, we are heading into time being here in the lab today. I always like to end the session with a couple of questions. The first one being, what advice do you have for our listeners, or, just general advice that you might have had from your journey within your career?
Yeah. Always be networking.
Yeah.
So when you're going to, whether it be a professional group, get involved in those community security outlets, whether it's, like here, I know it's like B-Sides, Women in Security. It could be, ISACA or Cloud Security Alliance, whatever that might be. Because what you're thinking about is kind of your dream job, who you want to be as that security professional. Find that person that you want to mirror from their success, and then find out what did they do? What groups are they a part of? Kind of find that security tribe that you could see yourself growing with. And then you're going to meet those people, and that's where your opportunities are going to arise. LinkedIn, Glassdoor, Built-in, there's all these different job platforms, but that's just the application process. That's just one big snippet. You networking, you taking control of that career path is going to be key.
Oh, that's amazing. That's great advice.
Good. I'm glad it is.
Where were you when I first started, Jessica? Everyone needs a Jessica. And then, oh gosh. And then this kind of leads to the last question. I'm sure a lot of people would like to reach out to you and connect through social media, or even learn more about OPCyberTalent. Do you have any good contact information that you can give them, or areas for them to look into?
Yeah, absolutely. So OPCyberTalent has its very own page on LinkedIn. I am available on LinkedIn. People contact me all the time. I'm more than willing to connect with you and give you as much advice as I can. Just a little bit about my practice. So OPCyberTalent, we are a division of Objective Partners headquartered out of Chicago. And we have really specialized in the areas of identity and GRC, but and then security leadership roles, security engineering, architects, etc. However, if people want to contact me directly, that would be jcassidy@opcybertalent.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jessica. And thank you all
for having
today.
Me.
Oh, it was so fun to have you in the lab. We'll probably have you again another time.
I would love it.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. And thank you all for allowing Jessica to come in the lab today so we can all collaborate.
So
no problem. See you around.
Okay.